South Africa's rand touching 11-week highs yesterday. 666.50 is a point that we did touch, and that against, a very weaker dollar. Is it basically that we're looking at, a weaker dollar story more than anything else?
Morning, Alishia. Yes, we've seen the rand strengthen significantly this week, and it's of course occurred at a time when we've also seen tremendous weakness in the US dollar. However, that isn't actually the entirety of the story. Although the dollar is having a huge impact on the rand's movements at the moment, it also seems that the rand has strengthened against other emerging market currencies, which would suggest that it isn't just a dollar story. We suspect that there may be some corporate action taking place in the market because, of course, at times of risk aversion, as we're seeing now with regards to the situation with the US debt ceiling, one would expect the rand to have weakened significantly. The fact that it hasn't and there's been ongoing strike activity suggests that there's a lot more going on here.
Well, let's take a look at some of the other factors that could potentially be at play. You've mentioned corporate action on the one hand, but also we're seeing the bond market still enjoying a lot of support from foreign investors right now.
Absolutely, Alishia, and this has been a trend that we've seen actually since last year. Inflows into the bond market have continued, and they've been especially strong, and this has occurred at a time that investors have actually been pulling out of SA equity markets. So outflows as far as equities are concerned have also been quite strong, but this has been dwarfed by the massive inflows that we've seen and are continuing to see that are coming into the bond market. So that could certainly be helping to prop up the rand. As you mentioned, there's also the possibility that there's corporate action and that the SARB isn't been active in mopping up those extra dollars. Of course, there's also the fact that the gold price has strengthened significantly as we've seen the dollar come off. So it's probably some combination of all three of these events that's seen the rand strengthen so markedly this week.
Of course, just boosting the appeal has been our relatively high rates compared to rates we're seeing in the developed world, and it seems like that's a scenario that's going to be sticking around a lot longer than originally anticipated. We've got key drivers right now coming through and indicating that we may well see a tightening at this stage of the game being put off for a longer while.
Yes, Alishia, I mean, certainly that is the million-dollar question at the moment, specifically the health of the US economy, and that flows into when the Fed is going to start to normalize policy rates. And then, of course, locally we're seeing the South African economy enter a bit of a soft patch as well. And that, of course, is playing into our own interest rate expectations, where the market had previously been anticipating the first rate hike to take place at the end of this year. We've now seen those expectations come off and shift in line with our view to the first quarter of next year. And of course, yesterday we had that South African leading indicator coming out, third monthly consecutive decline, and that just supports our view that we're seeing a moderation in economic activity that will continue into the second half. And of course, backing that up, we're then going to see, in our view, a delayed rate tightening cycle as opposed to an early one.
Your outlook for the rest of the week on the rand dollar front specifically, Nomvuyo?
Well, Alishia, a lot, of course, will depend on what happens in the US with regards to the US debt ceiling. So should we see levels of risk aversion spike or remain elevated, that should be negative for the rand. But as we've seen, the rand seems to be doing its own thing at the moment. But if that situation gets significantly worse and markets are potentially spooked by that, then we'd expect to see the rand weaken and perhaps retrace as far as 681.